The latest Twitter files showed that the intelligence community was actively involved in discrediting the Hunter Biden laptop story. Does it bother the president and those at the White House that a government agency like the FBI was involved in suppressing a legitimate news story?
Again, I'm just going to refer you to the FBI. I'm not going to comment from here about that.
All right, that's Karine Jean-Pierre fielding some questions about the Twitter files. Does this seem in line, consistent with the approach that a lot of liberals have taken, which is that there's nothing to see here, folks, don't ask me these kinds of questions?
And she said that over and over again, did she not?
Yeah.
No comment from us. Take it up with the FBI. Like the FBI is going to offer comment on this.
Right.
The FBI works for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
This is the whole problem with this thing, is the bureaucracy has grown beyond the ability of the American people to hold it accountable vis-a-vis the democratic process, because the people ostensibly in charge of the bureaucracy who pick the bureaucrats, the people we vote on, the Congress and the president, they have no actual control over it. They don't even know what's going on at it. Clearly, Donald Trump had no idea what was going on. He was railing against it, but failed to do anything about it. And I don't think Joe Biden necessarily does either.
Or they know.
Or they know and they don't care.
Approve. Or they tacitly approve. I mean, I think in this instance, it's particularly problematic because they're asking her about a story and the FBI's interference on a story that has direct implications for Joe Biden's candidacy and his family, right? So to the extent that I think you're right, it's always kind of a shifting of the buck, passing of the buck to say, don't ask me, ask the FBI in a way that's problematic. Here it's especially disconcerting that they're pretending that there's this Chinese wall up and that we had nothing to do with this. This is of no concern. How dare you almost is the tone. Ask me about this kind of a question. This is beneath me. And I don't know. There's a real credibility concern here because I think a lot of Americans across the ideological spectrum are very concerned about the FBI, are concerned about the deep state and malpractice. You have Tucker Carlson running with a story that he has a source that has confirmed proof that the CIA was involved in JFK's assassination. That's a whole other.
I missed that one, really?
That's a whole, you should watch the segment for yourselves and judge for yourself about the integrity of, the basis for that claim and this unnamed source and all of that. But the point is, the idea of that kind of thing happening is not out of left field for a lot of Americans because of our understanding of exactly how those kinds of organizations have historically operated, as I talked about in a radar I did a while back about this defund the FBI movement and all of that. So there's an integrity problem. There's a credibility problem when the White House refuses to acknowledge anything substantive coming out of these Twitter files.
And they comment all the time on what the social media companies are doing. That's one of the big problems here, or potentially, I think, legal problems, is that whenever Twitter, Facebook, or Google make a moderation decision they don't like, they speak up about that. Joe Biden accused Facebook of killing people by not taking down COVID skepticism with greater urgency. The previous press secretary, Jen Psaki, inveighed against tech companies for not doing more to police misinformation. A White House comms person, Kate Bedingfield, went on Morning Joe and answered a question from Mika Brzezinski who said, if they don't do more about misinformation, would you punish them with regulation? And she said, yeah, we're going to look at that. I mean, take that on one hand, and then look at what the FBI is doing behind closed doors to influence tech, and they're threatening the companies, and I think that adds up to something. So anyway, their tongues are not tied when they're upset with what social media is doing. But now we want answers on what the FBI was doing, how they feel about that. No comment. You got to go to the FBI for that.
Yeah. By the way, there are a couple of big tech bills coming down the pike this week, which are ostensibly designed to protect some of these, big tech companies against certain kind of overreaches. So if you're concerned about the Apple Store being able to be a monopoly and basically decide whether or not you have access to various apps. We saw Parler get deplatformed. We saw, PayPal has been pressured to not allow certain kind of transactions when the underlying politics of the transaction is deemed to be inappropriate. If you're concerned about those kind of choke points at the app level, then you should be enthusiastic about some of the bills that have bipartisan support, but are now being held up by Chuck Schumer, who, surprise, surprise, Google Open Secrets, is a huge recipient of big tech money. And so around and around we go. I think there's actually a lot of bipartisan concern about the ways in which, including, I just interviewed a leftist on my podcast on Monday for Monday's episode. And they were very clear about this. Like, they are someone who identifies with a lot of the more left, even I would say maybe woke left cultural issues, but they don't want so-called violent rhetoric to be taken off of Twitter. They would prefer a world where, in the exchange between Representative Mace and Alejandra, the woman that we talked about last week who ended up in that congressional exchange, where her former tweets about accosting Supreme Court members was criticized as a hypocritical, saying that she wanted violent speech not to be allowed on Twitter. My guess says, I actually think Alejandra is right, but also that means that right-wing violent speech should be allowed, and that's a consistent way to go about it. So if you care about that actually being consistent, there are policies that are coming down the pike. There is bipartisan consensus around this sort of thing, but we're not seeing that kind of message coming out of the White House, and unfortunately, we're kind of not seeing that message coming out of Elon Musk either, who has disbanded any of his boards that were supposed to be getting to the root of how to design policy that was equal. And instead, there's been this open embrace of this vengeance narrative where it's like, well, you guys are mean to us, now we're going to be mean to you, and round we go. Who's winning from this? Who's benefiting from this?
No one. I don't think the problem will only be solved if you actually, in my view, you have to actually you have to have some policy to prevent agencies like the FBI and the CDC from communicating with social media companies in this way. It is not they each now have a division that does social media outreach, that flags things in this manner, and that is not appropriate and should not be done in the same way that it's not appropriate for public officials can't campaign or can't use their public offices to campaign, the Hatch Act, et cetera. It has to be something like that is just not, they don't tell social media companies what to do. I would like it if politicians didn't do that either, but they kind of have the right because of the congressional rules. They get to speak on whatever topic they want. That's not necessarily true for government employees. They could be constrained from engaging with platforms in this way. That would be the change I would like to see.
Yeah, I mean, my only hesitation as I'm thinking through that is, would there be an exception for? I mean, how do you manage if there was a sincere terrorist threat? Like, I even don't want to say that out loud because so often the idea of a sincere terrorist threat is weaponized to allow people to have the kind of overreaches we're describing here.
Yes.
But
we need to narrow their scope.
Yeah.
To yes, they are allowed to message on actual threats of terrorism and organized violence.
Incredible.
But
threats.
What they're doing is expanding the Department of Homeland Security ever-expanding mandate to police opinions they don't like relating to the Afghanistan pullout and COVID and all sorts of other things. Ukraine. We need to narrow the missions of these organizations, downsize many of these organizations. I mean, we could cut virtually everything Department of Homeland Security does without any loss to Homeland Security. Whole TSA gone tomorrow under the Robbie regime. That's the first thing to go. Whole thing shut down overnight, would not impact safety and security one iota.
Are libertarian candidates running on that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, that's a pretty strong endorsement for paying more attention to what's going on outside of the aisles.
You want to carry on a moisturizer that is this big rather than this bag? Our reckless freedom would allow you to do that. I know it's just wild.
Policy anyway. I thought I read.
Are they?
They're walking back the liquid requirement.
I know it's 3.4 ounces because I know which size hairspray I'm allowed to bring in my suitcase.
Yeah, I thought I saw on.
No, aren't they planning to not let you bring your laptops on as well? They're always threatening to do that.
Yeah, it's a story from 3 days ago.
We'll just put them in our suitcases and get them stolen, I guess.
The UK ended its travel size liquid rule for carry-ons. Will the US do the same?
Well, the UK does all sorts of smart things that we refuse to do. I wish we could be more like our European compatriots who truly know freedom, unlike us here in the US.
Indeed. Again, Robbie Suave coming out for Medicare for All at this late stage.
Oh,
just
God.
amazing.
Let's wrap.
We're rising for you right after this.